At 8:52 a.m. on December 20th, a vault specialist at Buckingham Palace discovered a sealed compartment that had been overlooked for 28 years. Inside sat jewelry pieces everyone assumed had been distributed to William and Harry long ago. The discovery would reveal that Diana had left specific instructions no one had ever found. It was a discovery that theoretically shouldn't have been possible. Marcus Thornbury had been conducting vault inventories for the royal collection for 16 years. It was a meticulous job that required equal parts historical knowledge and mathematical precision. Every piece of jewelry, every historical artifact, and every item of value in the palace's secure storage had to be accounted for. They had to be measured and documented with absolute accuracy. It was routine work, tedious but essential. It was the kind of task that revealed its importance only when something went wrong. That December morning, Thornbury was completing a standard audit of one of the smaller vaults. It was a secure room that housed items from the late 20th century, requiring climate control but not actively displayed. He was verifying dimensions against archived blueprints when he noticed something odd. The vault's interior measurements did not match the exterior dimensions. The discrepancy was small, perhaps 12 inches, but it was undeniably there. Thornbury ran the measurements again, certain he had made an error, but the numbers held. The vault's walls were thicker on one side than the blueprints indicated, suggesting either a construction error from decades ago or something more intentional. He reported the discrepancy to his supervisor, who arrived within 20 minutes with structural scanning equipment. By 9:30 a.m., they had confirmed what Thornbury suspected. Behind the vault's eastern wall was a concealed compartment approximately 16 inches deep. It was accessible through a panel so carefully integrated into the wall's design that it appeared completely solid. The decision to open the compartment required authorization from senior palace officials. By 10:15 a.m., Margaret Hartwell, deputy keeper of the Privy Purse, had arrived to oversee the process. She watched as vault specialists carefully removed the concealed panel, revealing a space that had clearly been sealed for decades. Inside sat a single item, a black velvet box approximately 12 inches square with a cream-colored envelope attached to its top. The envelope bore a seal and a date written in elegant script, August 24, 1997. Hartwell felt her breath catch in her throat. August 24, 1997 was just 7 days before Princess Diana's death in Paris. The handwriting on the envelope, even before anyone confirmed it, was unmistakably Diana's. The box was carefully removed and transported to a secure examination room. Hartwell, now joined by two other senior officials, photographed everything in place before carefully opening the envelope. Inside was a letter, 2 pages in Diana's handwriting, with a list of names and specific instructions. As Hartwell read, her expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief. The letter detailed bequests of jewelry pieces contained in the box. They were personal items Diana wanted distributed to specific individuals. These were not family members, at least not primarily, but people who had shown her kindness during difficult periods. The specificity of the instructions suggested Diana had planned this carefully. She knew these pieces needed to be separated from the official distribution of her estate. The velvet box itself contained exactly what the letter described. There were 7 pieces of jewelry, each wrapped separately in tissue paper and labeled with a small card in Diana's writing. It contained a gold watch she had worn daily, 2 bracelets with obvious personal significance, and a childhood locket. There was also a sapphire brooch, a pearl necklace, and a delicate gold chain with a small diamond pendant. Each piece had a name attached, and as Hartwell read through the designations, she understood immediately why this discovery would complicate everything. Diana had not simply left jewelry to family members. She had left pieces to people the palace would now need to locate and contact. Most remarkably, she had left 1 piece to a person no one would have expected Diana to remember with generosity. By 11 a.m., senior palace officials were in emergency consultation. Prince William and Prince Harry needed to be notified immediately. What Diana had created, sealed in that vault 28 years ago, was a final act of generosity and forgiveness. It would force decisions no one was prepared to make. When Diana died in August 1997, her jewelry collection was substantial. It included pieces from the royal collection she had worn during her marriage. It also included personal items she had purchased or received as gifts, and several significant pieces with deep emotional meaning. The distribution of these items was handled through Diana's estate, managed by executives appointed in her will. The major ceremonial pieces, those that technically belonged to the crown, were returned to the royal collection. Her engagement ring, the famous sapphire that had belonged to Charles's grandmother, was given to Prince William, who later presented it to Catherine upon their engagement. The aquamarine ring Diana had worn frequently after her divorce went to Prince Harry, who gave it to Meghan. Various other pieces were distributed between the two brothers according to Diana's stated wishes and the executor's judgment. But what no one realized at the time was that Diana had created a separate set of instructions for a small collection of deeply personal items. These were not ceremonial jewels or famous pieces. They were the jewelry Diana wore every day, items that carried memories unrelated to her royal role. The concealment had been accomplished during a vault reorganization at Kensington Palace in 1996. Diana was negotiating her divorce and planning for an independent future. She had worked with a private solicitor named Thomas Bellamy. He was the same man who would later help her create the hidden archive room that was discovered only recently. Bellamy had arranged for the compartment to be created at Buckingham Palace, where Diana occasionally stored items requiring high security. He had sealed the jewelry along with her instructions. Bellamy had died in 2003, taking the knowledge of the compartment with him. Diana's instructions to him had been clear. The jewelry was not to be distributed immediately upon her death. It was to remain sealed until such time as the people she designated were ready to receive them. Alternatively, it was to stay hidden until the pieces were discovered naturally during routine palace maintenance. She had trusted that eventually the compartment would be found and her wishes would then be honored. For 28 years, that trust had been misplaced. The compartment remained sealed, overlooked during vault inventories that checked cataloged items against their records. They had no reason to physically measure wall dimensions until Marcus Thornberry's meticulous work revealed the discrepancy. Diana had hoped this would eventually lead to discovery. The significance of these specific pieces lay not in their monetary value, which was modest compared to Diana's more famous jewelry. Their value lay in their personal meaning. The gold watch had been a gift from her father, worn throughout her marriage and divorce. The bracelets had been given to her by close friends during periods of particular difficulty. The childhood locket contained photos of her own mother and siblings, a link to her identity before she became Princess of Wales. These were the pieces that represented Diana as a person rather than as a royal figure. She had chosen to distribute them not according to royal protocol or a state convention. She distributed them according to her own sense of who deserved recognition and gratitude. What made the discovery particularly poignant was Diana's timing. August 24, 1997, was just days before her trip to Paris with Dodi Fayed. Diana could not have known she was weeks from death, but she clearly felt an urgency to put these instructions in place. Perhaps she sensed the vulnerability of her position. Perhaps she simply wanted these matters settled while she had the clarity and time to do so thoughtfully. Whatever her reasoning, Diana had created one final bequest that had remained hidden for nearly 3 decades. Now that it had been discovered, it would fall to her sons to decide whether to honor wishes they had never known their mother had made. Prince William received the call at 11:47 a.m. while in a meeting at Kensington Palace. His private secretary entered quietly and whispered that there was an urgent matter requiring his immediate attention. The tone was enough to make William excuse himself and take the call in an adjacent room. Margaret Hartwell explained the discovery, carefully describing the hidden compartment and the sealed box. Most importantly, she described the letter. She read portions of it over the phone, and William listened in silence, processing the implications of what his mother had left behind. "I need to see it," William said when she finished, "and Harry needs to be told immediately." By early afternoon, both brothers had been briefed separately. Harry, in California, received a secure call outlining the discovery and was sent digital copies of Diana's letter and the list of bequests. William, at Buckingham Palace by 2 p.m., held the original documents in his hands. He was seeing his mother's handwriting for what felt like the 100th time that month. Each discovery was more emotionally complicated than the last. Diana's letter was characteristically direct and personal. "My dearest William and Harry," it began, "if you are reading this, then the pieces I have set aside have finally been found. These items are not part of my official jewelry, and I have kept them separate because they carry meanings I want preserved through specific bequests. She then listed 7 pieces and their designated recipients, with brief explanations for each choice. The gold watch was to go to Inspector Graham Fletcher, her personal protection officer from 1994 to 1996. Graham stood beside me during the most difficult period of my life, Diana had written. He never judged, never spoke out of turn, and treated me with a humanity that had nothing to do with protocol. I want him to have this so he knows his kindness was not forgotten. The first bracelet was designated for Rosa Monkton, one of Diana's closest friends. Rosa understood me in ways few people did, Diana explained. This bracelet was a gift from her during a particularly dark time. I wore it every day afterward. I wanted to have it back with my thanks for being real when everything else felt false. The second bracelet was for a nurse named Patricia Whitmore, who had cared for Diana during a private medical procedure in 1995. Patricia treated me like a person, not a princess, Diana wrote. That may seem small, but when you are constantly performing, someone who sees you as simply human is a gift beyond measure. The sapphire brooch was designated for Diana's hairdresser, Sam McKnight, who had worked with her for years and had become a confidant. Sam made me laugh when I needed it most, Diana wrote. He also kept my secrets, which in my world is rarer than you might think. The pearl necklace was for Lucia Flecha de Lima, the wife of the Brazilian ambassador, who had been one of Diana's most trusted friends during the separation and divorce. Lucia gave me perspective when I was drowning in the aristocracy's expectations, Diana explained. She reminded me there was a world beyond these walls where I could still be myself. The childhood locket was designated for her brother, Charles Spencer, with a note that was briefer but no less meaningful. For Charles, who remembers who I was before all of this began. But it was the 7th item, the delicate gold chain with a small diamond pendant, that stopped William's breath when he read its designation. For Camilla, Diana had written, to be given to her when she understands what I understood. That loving Charles meant accepting you could never fully have him. If she has reached that understanding, then she has earned the same compassion I wish I had been shown. William read that paragraph 3 times, trying to process what it meant. His mother, who had been betrayed and humiliated, had left a piece of jewelry specifically for the woman most people assumed Diana hated. She had endured the public dissolution of her marriage, in part because of Camilla's presence. Yet the letter concluded with a final section addressing items for Diana's grandchildren. The small diamond earrings I wore on my wedding day, Diana wrote, are for George, Charlotte, and Louis, to be divided as William sees fit when they are old enough to know who I truly was. Not who the mythology has made me. Diana's closing words were simple but heavy with meaning. These are not royal jewels. They are mine, freely given to those who showed me humanity when I needed it most. Please honor these wishes, even if they seem strange or complicated. Each person named gave me something I desperately needed. Let them know their kindness mattered. William set down the letter and sat in silence. Beside him, Margaret Hartwell and 2 other senior officials waited. They understood that what Diana had asked would create complications, both logistical and emotional. Finally, William spoke. We need to get Harry here in person. This requires a conversation we cannot have over a video call. Within hours, arrangements were being made for Harry to fly to London on the next available flight. Both brothers understood that what they decided in the coming days would be final. They could choose to honor their mother's wishes completely, partially, or not at all. No one would force them to give away jewelry that had been Diana's. But both of them also understood that ignoring these wishes would feel like a betrayal. It would betray the mother who had tried so carefully to express her final gratitude. William and Harry faced impossible choices. Harry arrived at London Heathrow on the morning of December 21st, moving through private terminals to avoid media attention. A palace car delivered him directly to Kensington Palace, where William was waiting. They met in the same room where they had recently read their mother's letter from the hidden archive. The symmetry was not lost on either of them. Diana, it seemed, had left them a trail of messages, each one more challenging than the last. They sat together with the velvet box open between them. Each of the 7 pieces was laid out carefully on black cloth, Diana's letter beside them. For several minutes, neither brother spoke. They simply looked at the jewelry, each item carrying memories they had not fully processed. They had barely processed these feelings in the weeks since her death, much less in the nearly 3 decades that had followed. Harry broke the silence first. We have to honor this. All of it. There is no question in my mind. William nodded slowly. I agree in principle, but some of these bequests are complicated. The Camilla piece, Harry said, not as a question, but as an acknowledgement of what they both knew was the hardest decision. Yes. William picked up the delicate gold chain, letting it pool in his palm. Mom left this for her with a very specific message about understanding and compassion. Harry leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. It would have been easier if she had just left everything to us. If she had not asked us to be generous to people, we might prefer to forget. But she did ask that, William said quietly. And I think that is precisely the point. She wanted us to see that she was capable of forgiveness, even toward Camilla. Maybe especially toward Camilla. They sat with that truth for a while. Neither of them had fully forgiven Camilla for her role in their parents' marriage breakdown. Neither of them had reached the place of compassion Diana had apparently found before her death. But Diana's letter was asking them to deliver that compassion on her behalf, even if they could not yet feel it themselves. A senior legal advisor entered at William's request to clarify their obligations. The jewelry was Diana's personal property, the advisor explained. Her wishes regarding its distribution, while not part of her formal will, were legally binding as expressed intentions. You have the authority to fulfill or decline these bequests. However, declining would require an active decision rather than a default one. So if we do nothing, William asked, what happens? The pieces remain in limbo, the advisor replied, neither distributed according to her wishes nor officially designated otherwise. That is not acceptable, Harry said firmly. Mom made her wishes clear. We do not get to ignore them because they make us uncomfortable. William appreciated his brother's clarity, even as he felt the weight of what fulfilling those wishes would require. They would need to contact people Diana had designated, some of whom were now elderly or deceased. They would need to explain that Diana had left them something none of them expected. And they would need to have a conversation with their father about giving Camilla a piece of jewelry that came with an implicit message about pain and understanding. Catherine, who had been waiting in an adjacent room, joined them at William's request. She read through Diana's letter carefully, then looked at both brothers with the directness they had come to value from her. These were her possessions to designate as she wished, Catherine said simply. The question is not whether her wishes were convenient, but whether you are willing to honor them. Even the Camilla piece, William asked. Catherine met his eyes. Especially the Camilla piece. Because that is the one that shows who your mother had become by the end of her life. Someone capable of recognizing shared pain rather than nursing exclusive victimhood. Harry nodded. Catherine is right. And if we are honest, giving Camilla that necklace might actually help us more than it helps her. It proves Mom was bigger than the bitterness people tried to trap her in. The items designated for George, Charlotte, and Louis would be placed in a secure trust. They would be accessible when each child reached 18. William and Harry agreed that their children deserved to receive these pieces, with a full understanding of their grandmother's intentions and character. By late afternoon, they had drafted a plan for implementation. The most straightforward bequests would be handled first. Rosa Monckton, still living and in occasional contact with the family, would be easy to reach. Inspector Fletcher, Diana's former protection officer, would require tracking down but posed no particular complication. The Camilla conversation, they agreed, needed to happen last. Both brothers needed time to prepare emotionally for what that discussion would entail, and they needed their father present. The request was as much about Charles's understanding as it was about Camilla's acceptance. That evening, William called their father to request a meeting. Charles, informed of the jewelry discovery in Diana's letter, agreed immediately to gather at Clarence's house on December 22nd. His voice over the phone carried an emotion William had rarely heard from his father. It was something between grief and anticipation. It was as though Charles was both dreading and needing the conversation about to occur. Before Harry returned to his temporary accommodations in London, the brothers stood together looking at the 7 pieces of jewelry one final time. Each piece represented a relationship Diana had valued. Each represented a kindness she wanted acknowledged. And each carried a final message about who she had been beneath the mythology. She was better than us, Harry said quietly. William did not argue. She was trying to be. And maybe by honoring this, we become a little better too. They secured the jewelry and left Kensington Palace together. Two brothers united by the impossible task of fulfilling their mother's wishes 28 years later, but determined to fulfill them completely. The meeting at Clarence House on December 22nd was scheduled for 2 o'clock p.m., chosen deliberately to allow Charles time to compose himself after morning engagements. William and Harry arrived together carrying the velvet box. It now contained only one piece of jewelry, the delicate gold chain with the small diamond pendant Diana had designated for Camilla. Charles greeted them in his private sitting room. It was the same space where so many difficult family conversations had taken place over the years. Camilla was not present. Both brothers had requested this initial conversation include only the three of them, so they could discuss how to approach the request before presenting it to her. Charles sat heavily in his preferred chair, looking older than William had seen him recently. The discovery of Diana's jewelry, coming so soon after the unsealing of her hidden archive, had clearly affected his father deeply. Each revelation seemed to peel back another layer of the past Charles had thought he understood. It revealed complexities he had missed or chosen not to see. William began carefully explaining the full contents of Diana's letter and the bequests they had already committed to honoring. Charles listened without interruption, nodding occasionally, his expression difficult to read. When William reached the final bequest, the one designated for Camilla, he paused. Harry took over, reading directly from Diana's letter. For Camilla, to be given to her when she understands what I understood. That loving Charles meant accepting you could never fully have him. If she has reached that understanding, then she has earned the same compassion I wish I had been shown. The silence that followed was profound. Charles's face had gone pale, and his hands gripped the arms of his chair tightly. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. May I see the piece? William opened the box and handed his father the delicate gold chain. Charles held it carefully, the pendant catching the afternoon light. It was not an expensive piece, not something that would have drawn attention in Diana's collection, but its simplicity was part of its meaning. This was not a grand gesture. It was a quiet acknowledgement of shared experience. She wore this? Charles asked. William nodded. In several photographs from 96 and 97, usually under other jewelry, close to her heart. Charles closed his eyes briefly, processing what Diana had done. She had worn a piece of jewelry she planned to give to Camilla. She had carried it against her own skin, perhaps as a way of making peace with her own pain, before offering that same piece to the woman who had helped cause it. What do you want us to do? Harry asked, his tone neutral but firm. We are prepared to honor Mom's wishes, but this one requires your input and Camilla's consent. Charles opened his eyes and looked at his sons. What do you think she meant by discretion? When she understands what I understood. William had thought about this extensively since reading the letter. I think Mom was saying that Camilla would understand eventually that loving you means living with the institution's constraints. That you belong to the crown in ways that make complete personal happiness impossible. Mom learned that painfully. She is suggesting Camilla has learned it too, or would learn it. Charles's expression crumpled slightly. She was more generous than I ever gave her credit for. She was also strategic, Harry added, not unkindly. She knew this bequest would force us to confront the humanity in someone we would prefer to villainize. That is very much who Mom was in those final years. Forcing people toward compassion even when they resisted it. Charles stood, walking to the window, still holding the gold chain. After a long silence, he turned back to his sons. I will speak with Camilla. I will explain what Diana left and what her message meant. If Camilla wishes to accept the piece, then I believe we should honor Diana's intention. If Camilla cannot accept it, then the piece should be preserved but not forced upon her. William nodded. That seems right. Charles moved toward his sons. He stood close enough that the formality between king and princes dissolved into something more fundamental. They were simply a father and his sons navigating grief that had no statute of limitations. Your mother, Charles said quietly, was capable of forgiveness I never deserved. She saw Camilla clearly, understood the impossible position we were all in, and chose compassion over bitterness. That is who she became by the end, and you are right to honor that, even when it is difficult. Harry spoke, his voice thick. Will you tell us what Camilla says? We need to know this reaches closure one way or another. Charles promised he would. That evening, after William and Harry had departed, Charles showed Camilla the gold chain and read Diana's words. According to palace sources who spoke only on condition of anonymity, Camilla wept. She wept not from guilt, though she surely felt that, but from the recognition of what Diana had understood and acknowledged. She recognized that loving Charles meant accepting perpetual incompleteness. She understood that being the other woman meant bearing a burden that was never fully lifted. Both of them, Diana and Camilla, had paid prices for loving the same complicated man. Camilla accepted the necklace but made a decision immediately. She would never wear it publicly. It would go into her personal safe, a private acknowledgement of Diana's extraordinary gesture, but not something that needed to become a public symbol. Some acts of forgiveness were too sacred for public consumption. Her only comment, shared with Charles in private, became known to William and Harry through their father several days later. She gave me what I could never earn. It was an acknowledgement of debt that could never be repaid. It was an acknowledgement of generosity that exceeded anything Camilla had expected or perhaps deserved. And it closed a chapter that had remained painfully open for nearly 3 decades. The conversation at Clarence House accomplished something unexpected. It did not heal all wounds or resolve all conflicts. William and Harry did not suddenly embrace Camilla as a beloved family member. Charles did not stop carrying guilt about his failed first marriage, but it created space for a different narrative. It was one in which Diana was not simply a victim, but also an agent of her own peace. One in which Camilla was not simply a villain, but also a fellow sufferer in an impossible situation. And one in which forgiveness, even incomplete and complicated, mattered more than perfect justice. As December 22nd ended and the brothers prepared to handle the remaining bequests, they understood that their mother had left them something more valuable than jewelry. She had left them a template for how to hold complexity, how to honor pain without being consumed by it, and how to move forward even when the past remained unresolved. The palace announcement came on December 23rd, carefully worded to inform without revealing the complications involved. During recent vault maintenance at Buckingham Palace, personal items belonging to the late Princess Diana were discovered. These items are being distributed according to the princess's expressed wishes. Out of respect for the recipients and for the princess's memory, no further details will be provided. The brevity of the statement only intensified public curiosity, but the palace held firm. No names of recipients would be released. No descriptions of the jewelry would be provided. This was a private distribution of personal property, and it would be handled with the discretion Diana had clearly intended. Over the following days, recipients began quietly receiving their bequests. Each was contacted personally by either William or Harry, who explained the discovery and their mother's specific instructions. The reactions ranged from shock to tears to profound gratitude. Rosa Monckton, Diana's close friend, received her bracelet on December 24th. She issued a brief statement through her representatives. I am deeply moved that Diana remembered me in this way. The bracelet she left me represents a friendship that sustained both of us through difficult times. I will treasure it always, and I thank her sons for honoring their mother's wishes with such grace. Inspector Graham Fletcher, Diana's former protection officer, was tracked down to his retirement home in Devon. He received Diana's gold watch with a personal visit from William, who thanked him for his service and loyalty. Fletcher, now in his 70s, was reportedly overcome with emotion. He told William that protecting Diana had been the honor of his career. Knowing she had remembered him brought closure he had not known he needed. The nurse, Patricia Whitmore, had died in 2012, but her daughter received the designated bracelet on her mother's behalf. In a letter to William and Harry, she wrote that her mother had spoken often of Princess Diana's kindness and humanity. Receiving this request felt like Diana was reaching across time to thank a woman who had treated her with dignity when she desperately needed it. Sam McKnight, Diana's hairdresser, received the sapphire brooch and shared his reaction on social media with William's permission. Diana was not just a client, he wrote. She was a friend who trusted me with her vulnerabilities and her laughter. That she thought to leave me something so personal is a gift beyond measure. I will treasure it forever. Each recipient, in their own way, painted a picture of Diana that differed from the public mythology. She was not a perfect victim, nor a saint beyond reproach. She was a woman who recognized kindness and valued genuine human connection. She wanted to acknowledge the people who had seen her as a person rather than as a princess. The pieces designated for George, Charlotte, and Lua were placed in a secure trust at Coutts Bank. They came with instructions that each child would receive access at age 18, along with copies of Diana's letter explaining her intentions. William and Catherine made the decision to tell the children about the jewelry when they were older. They wanted them to understand their grandmother's thoughtfulness without burdening them with adult complexity too young. Camilla's bequest remained private, known only to Charles, William, Harry, and a handful of trusted advisors. No public announcement was made, and Camilla never spoke of it outside the immediate family. But those who knew about it understood its significance. Diana's final gesture toward Camilla was perhaps her most remarkable evidence of a capacity for forgiveness. It transcended personal pain in favor of shared humanity. As Christmas approached and the jewelry distribution neared completion, a more complete picture of Diana emerged. The woman who had sealed those pieces in August 1997, just days before her death, had been planning her legacy with care. She had wanted specific people remembered. She had wanted her capacity for forgiveness documented. And she had wanted her sons to understand that strength sometimes meant generosity toward those who had caused pain. The public reaction to the little information that was released was overwhelmingly positive. Polling showed that 87% of Britons approved of William and Harry honoring their mother's wishes, even without knowing the specific details. Many people expressed that Diana's thoughtfulness in designating personal items was consistent with the humanitarian work she had been known for. American media coverage focused heavily on the forgiveness aspect. Several outlets ran pieces about Diana's rumored bequest to Camilla once that detail inevitably leaked through palace sources. The framing was largely admiring, portraying Diana as someone who had chosen compassion over bitterness in her final days. What the jewelry ultimately revealed was something the public had always sensed, but never fully confirmed. Diana had been planning for a future she would never see. She was taking care of details with the assumption she would have years to ensure everything was properly arranged. The fact that she had created these bequests just days before her death added tragic poignancy. It also demonstrated her forward-thinking nature. At Kensington Palace in the days after Christmas, William sat alone in his study. He looked at the documentation of the jewelry distribution. Every piece had been delivered. Every recipient had been contacted. Diana's wishes had been fulfilled completely, 28 years later, but fulfilled nonetheless. He thought about the hidden compartment that had preserved his mother's final messages. He thought of the archive room that had held her journals and recordings. And now he considered this jewelry that had carried her last expressions of gratitude and forgiveness. Diana had left a trail of breadcrumbs across nearly 3 decades. Each discovery revealed new dimensions of who she had been. The jewelry was gone now, distributed to the people Diana had designated. But what it represented remained evidence that Diana had been more than the simplified narrative suggested. She had been capable of remarkable generosity even toward those who had hurt her. And she had wanted her sons to see that capacity so they might develop it themselves. The empty compartment at Buckingham Palace would be sealed again, its purpose fulfilled. The velvet box would be preserved in royal archives as a physical reminder of Diana's thoughtfulness. The recipients of her bequests would carry her jewelry forward. Each piece was a tangible connection to a woman who had tried to settle accounts not with bitterness, but with grace. What Diana's jewelry revealed ultimately was not scandal or hidden secrets. It revealed character. It was the character of a woman who had suffered profoundly, but had chosen in the end to respond with forgiveness rather than vengeance. She chose gratitude rather than resentment. And she chose hope that the people she loved most, her sons, would understand that true strength sometimes meant letting go. It meant letting go of the very anger that felt most justified. The jewelry had changed everything, not because of what it was worth, but because of what it represented about who Diana had been. She was that person when no one was watching. She was that person when she was planning for a future she believed she would see. She was making choices about how she wanted to be remembered. And now, 28 years after her death, those choices had finally been honored. The jewelry had found its intended homes. Diana's final wishes had been fulfilled. Her legacy, already complex and multifaceted, had gained yet another dimension. She was not merely the people's princess who smiled for the cameras. She was the private woman who remembered kindness, valued humanity, and chose forgiveness even when it was neither required nor expected. That legacy, perhaps more than any other, was the true gift Diana had left behind.